There we go. So we will be distributing this recording by email to all registered participants. So if you have to leave early, then you'll be able to still watch the rest of it. If you do want to ask a question, please do. We love questions. Look to the bottom of your screens and click chat, then type your question in there and make sure that the question is directed to all presenters or all attendees, or I will not be able to see your question. And also, if you would like, please feel, oh, there's the spot where you, the chat box right there. And if you would like, please feel free to introduce yourself in the chat box and let us know what drew you to this webinar. It's always nice for us to know what the attendees are interested in learning about and what you're looking for from the webinar. And it's no pressure, but feel free to type in your introductions. This webinar will run for an hour, but there will be time for questions at the end. But also feel free to ask questions throughout the webinar. I will be monitoring the chat box, so I can let Ashton know if there's any questions that come up throughout. Also, throughout the webinar, we will be doing our food waste quiz. So to answer the questions we pose, we will launch a poll, and it's super easy. All you have to do is select the answer you think is correct. And don't worry, your answers are anonymous, so don't be shy. And if anybody has any technical difficulties, again, just message me in the chat box and I'll do my best to resolve them. Most importantly, before we get started, I would like to begin by acknowledging that Green Action Center is located on the ancestral lands of the Anishinaabe, Cree, Oji-Cree, Dakota, and Dene peoples, and the homeland of the Métis Nation. The water we drink comes from Shoal Lake 40 First Nation on Treaty 3 territory, and the hydroelectricity we use comes from numerous First Nation territories around Manitoba. Okay, and with that, I'll hand it over to Ashton to start the presentation. So Ashton, I'll stop sharing my screen so you can share your screen. Just bear with us for a moment.
Okay, can everybody see that okay, Kristen?
Yes, we can see it.
Perfect. Just get to here. So as Kristen mentioned, my name is Ashton, and I'm very excited to be doing this food waste reduction presentation for everybody. And I wanted to start off by a quote just to get everyone thinking about the importance of reducing food waste. So if global food waste were measured as a country, it would be the world's third largest emitter of GHG emissions after China and the US. So you can just kind of sit with that a little bit and just imagine like how much food waste is actually being thrown out across the world. So today I'm going to talk about a little bit about Green Action Center and Red River's Co-op Food Waste Reduction Project, as well as describing what food waste is, why should we care about food waste and food waste reduction, and some solutions at the end. And like Kristen mentioned, we're going to have questions throughout the presentation to keep everybody engaged, and feel free to ask questions throughout the presentation as well. So Green Action Center, we are a nonprofit that promotes greener living and promotes slowing down climate change. And we do this through environmental education and practical green solutions. And we work with households, workplaces, schools, communities around in Manitoba. And we've been around since 1985. We also have a social enterprise called Compost Winnipeg. And if you're not familiar with that, Compost Winnipeg works with households, apartments, schools, businesses, and restaurants to collect their food scraps and turn them into a nutrient-rich soil amendment so people can grow healthier produce with the soils. So if you're not familiar with Compost Winnipeg, you can look them up and maybe start composting with them. Green Action Center, we focus on waste reduction through our composting program and First Nations waste minimization, as well as sustainable transportation, where they focus on active and safe routes to school, workplace commuter options, and the annual Jack Frost and Commuter Challenge. And we also have our newer sustainability projects, which is the Green Audits team works with organizations to help them become more sustainable with building and energy, waste reduction, transportation, water, and food. And that's a little bit about Green Action Center. So the Red River Co-op food waste reduction pilot, Red River Co-op has been working over the past few years to really lower the amount of food waste that is going into the landfill. So they partnered with a few different organizations to divert food from the landfill. They work with Compost Winnipeg to divert food from the landfill and turn their food scraps into usable soil amendments. They work with Leftovers Foundation, where Leftovers collects the edible food and distributes it to a social agency so people who require some food can get it from them. And they work with Loop, and Loop partners Red River Co-op's more rural stores and connects them with farmers so that the food can go to the animals. And then we've been working more recently with Red River Co-op, finding some innovative ways to reduce the food. And if anyone's been into any or the St. Vital and Seasons locations recently, you might have seen some food waste reduction signs in the grocery stores. And I'll talk a little bit about this more at the end. But we also have a web page where the QR codes from those signs are linked to recipes and some more food waste tips. And since 2021, Red River Co-op has diverted over 540,000 kilograms of food, and I can just see that number increasing as they partner and work more in food waste reduction. So what is food waste? Food waste is the discarding or alternative use of food that's safe and nutritious for human consumption. And there's two different kinds of food waste. We have avoidable food waste, which is food that you can eat that ends up in the landfill instead of being eaten. So that would be food byproducts that are inedible, such as bones and things that you can't eat. And so this presentation will mostly be focusing on avoidable food waste. And so where does food waste happen? So this graph shows processing and manufacturing, production, harvest and storage, consumer waste, and distribution. Consumers in Canada make up a lot of food waste that is avoidable, and that would be things like household waste and restaurant waste as well. We also have the difference between food loss and food waste, where food loss is the discarding of food that occurs from production through to processing. And examples of that would be fruit rotting due to shortage of labor, and land being plowed under due to canceled orders, fish that are caught and then put back into the water to die if orders were canceled or the catch doesn't match the quota. And some examples of food waste would be surplus milk that is put down into the sewers, If a distribution truck refrigeration unit stops working, then the meat and dairy would go bad, and that would become food waste and unsold products that are sent to the landfills. And this graph demonstrates the total amount of food waste in Canada, avoidable and unavoidable. And food waste doesn't only happen in our households, it happens throughout all of the different states of the food value chain. So consumers make up households, retails, and restaurants. And food waste here happens when the market's oversaturation. They have restaurants can have expansive menu options, preparation mistakes, excess purchases, date codes, over serving, and a general negative attitude towards food. In the distribution stage, we have 2%, and that food waste comes from damage, ineffective storage and packaging, and rejection of perishables. In the processing and manufacturing stage, we have 47%, and food waste here comes from damage or incorrect ordering, grading process, and inefficiencies, labels, and packaging. And in the production and harvest and storage, we have 24%. And food waste here comes from weather extremes, overproduction, food safety scares, incorrect harvesting, spillage, grading standards for size, quality, contamination, and date codes as well. And in this graph, we have a hierarchy for reducing and recycling food scraps and other organic discards, going from source reduction at the top, which is the most preferred, down to the least preferred. And this is a really important graph because when we're thinking about food waste reduction, we want to make sure that we're reducing it at the source. So that would be just going back here, like the process or production and like the harvesting stage. And then edible food rescue. So that would be more of your household things, what you can do at home to not throw out waste. And then the next thing, if you do have waste, to compost it in your backyard, followed by small scale composting, centralized composting, mechanical composting, and then finally, as a last resort, would go to the landfill, which we obviously don't want because it creates a lot of greenhouse gas emissions. So again, stopping food waste at the source is your best option. So we're going to start with our first poll question. So how much food is wasted in Canadian households per year?
And just before I launch the poll question, I just wanted to ask everyone if they can see Ashton, if they can see the PowerPoint, because someone sent me a message saying that they can see the Gmail chat on Ashton's screen. So I want to make sure that everyone else
Oh,
is actually able to see the PowerPoint. I can see it. So if you can,
someone raised their hand.
so if you raise your hand, that means yes, you can see it. And you can also type in the question and answer if you can see it or not. Okay. Great. Okay, so I think it may be something on that the other person's end. Okay, perfect. All right. We'll get to the poll question. Just one moment. Okay, so we're asking you to guess how much food is wasted in Canadian households per year. Okay, we'll wait for a little bit more for a couple more folks to participate. Okay. So 80% of you guessed 2 to 3 million metric tons, and 20% 3 to 4 million metric tons. So Ashton, want to go see what the
Okay, so the answer is 2.38 million metric tons of food, which is worth $10.37 billion is wasted every year in Canada. And to put that in perspective, that would be the same weight as 215,000 school buses. So that's a really big number. But we'll move on to some food waste stats for Canada. So in Canada, 58% of food produced is lost or wasted each year. And of that 58%, 32% could be rescued to support communities across Canada. And when you think about it, in 2021, 18.4% of Canadians in our provinces said that they experienced food insecurity in their household. So if we didn't have food waste, or if the food was distributed in better ways, then we would have less food insecurity. And just a few more stats. Food waste costs Canadians more than $49 billion each year, and the average Canadian household spends $1,700 on food that is wasted every year. So food waste is a really big problem in Canada. And we're going to talk about ways to reduce your food waste coming up. But first, we have another quiz. So, where is most of the food in Canada wasted? Select the top two places where you think this happens. At home, on the delivery trucks, in grocery stores, in restaurants, on farms, or in the factory.
oh, I think there's one more person who could answer the poll. Give them a little bit of more time. Okay. Let me share the results. So we have half of you are thinking most of the food waste happens on farms. 38% of you also thought at home and in the factory. And then 25% of you thought in grocery stores and in restaurants. So let's see what the answer is.
So the answer is manufacturing accounts for 23% of food waste in Canada. So that would be like processing raw food into foods such as canned soup and frozen pizza, and households, which make up around 20% of food waste.
And I just want to reiterate that this is avoidable food waste. So like not avoidable and unavoidable, just to make that clear too.
Thank you. So why should we care about food waste, and why should we care about reducing our food waste? So there are so many benefits of reducing food waste. As kind of mentioned before, it would help to address food insecurity. So much of our food, over half of the food that Canada produces goes to waste, and 30% could be redistributed. So if we would cut down on food waste and redistribute it, it would help address a growing number of food insecure people in Canada. It would protect our planet's resources, and it would stop food from going to the landfill, where it contributes to greenhouse gas emissions. Um, Reducing your food waste would help you become a more conscious consumer. So if you plan out your meals and you think about the whole value chain about where your food comes from and how it got onto the grocery shelves, you will be a more conscious consumer. It will reduce our carbon footprints and saves money and energy. So we have another quiz. So when you throw out food, you're not just throwing out that food item, you're also throwing out different resources. So we're going to launch a poll to see what other resources get thrown out when you throw out your food as well.
Oh, Ashton, there's no poll for this one.
Never mind.
Yeah.
Here is what the answers are. So land, uh, the growing food requires land that was habitat for animals and plants. So you're also throwing out land resources. Um, the air quality, machines used for farming burns gas, which pollutes the air and emits greenhouse gases. The fuel from the trucks that move the food use gas, so it would be wasting the fuel as well. And the water, so farmers use water to help their crops grow. And water can also run off of farm soil, carrying chemicals into rivers and lakes. And food waste wastes about a quarter of the world's water through uneaten food. So the next time that you have food that you're going to throw away, just try to think about all of these resources that you're also throwing away as well. But thankfully, there are a few things that we can do to reduce our waste. So I'm going to mention a few household tips that you can do at home to cut down on your food waste. So we have plan, so you can plan your meals, plan your shopping lists to be more food friendly, storing your food properly, knowing the difference between best before and expiry dates. You can use up your food creatively and share excess food. So first we're going to talk about planning. So you can, one of the first things you can do is take inventory of your food. So before you go grocery shopping, take a look in your fridge and freezer and pantry and see what foods you already have, what foods are going to go bad that you should use up before you buy more. You can meal plan and write out a grocery list before you go grocery shopping and try to stick to that grocery list. And just shop for the ingredients that you need for your meal plan so you're not buying too much food for you or your household and then throwing it away. You can meal prep and do a personal food waste audit so you can collect your food scraps for a week or so, go through that and see kind of what you're throwing out. And you might be throwing out a lot of like broccoli, and so maybe the next week you won't buy broccoli, or you'll look at recipes to use up more of your broccoli and just things like that, just to really be aware of what you're buying and what you're throwing out as well. So we're gonna have another question. What are the top 2 foods that are wasted the most? Dairy products, meat and fish, sugar and maple syrup, fruits and veggies, and grains.
All right.
Nice.
Okay, so 89% of you thought it was fruits and veggies, 44% meat and fish, and 33% dairy products.
So the answer is field crops are the most wasted foods in Canada, followed by fruits and veggies. And as mentioned, by planning your meals ahead of time, you can avoid buying more food than you can eat, and be sure to eat all and any leftovers as well. Uh, Love Food, Hate Waste is also a great resource. So they have a planning portion calculator on their website, and it looks like this. So you can type in the ingredient that you're thinking of buying, and then you can enter in how many people you're cooking for, so adults, toddlers, children, teenagers, and the number of meals that you plan to make, and it will tell you the portions that you need to buy at the grocery store, and that way you're not buying more than you need and throwing out the leftovers. So yeah, that's a great resource. Love Food, Hate Waste. And then there's a few other ones online as well. And next, we're going to talk about proper food storage. So some things that you can do to help your food last longer are set the fridge to the right temperature. You can store foods properly and have an eat first bowl in your fridge. And I'll talk about all of these coming up. But first, we have a quiz. So what temperature should your refrigerator be set at to keep food fresh?
This is kind of a trick question too. Okay, I think everyone who answers is going to answer. So we're going to end. Oh, we got one more. Okay, so end the poll. So 75% of you said 5 degrees Celsius, 25% of you 10 degrees Celsius, and 13% of you thought 2 degrees Celsius. So what is the answer, Ashton?
Food that needs to be refrigerated should be stored between 0 and 5 degrees Celsius, and this will keep food safer from bacteria and help it last longer. Yeah, you can also find the temperature in your fridge by buying a thermometer and putting it aside for a few hours. So that's a tip that I just learned, and I think it's a little good one that you can do. And next, I'll talk about refrigerator storage. Um, so I also just learned this quite recently, but the way that the fridge is set up has different temperatures in it. So the door is the warmest part of the fridge. So you should keep things like condiments there because the ingredients that they're made up of are preservatives like vinegar. So they don't need to be kept as cold. And then on the top shelves, things it's slightly warmer. So things like leftovers and snacks that you'll use up fairly quickly can be kept on the upper shelves. The middle shelf is slightly warmer, so that would be good for some leftovers, things like yogurt, dips, and sauces and drinks. And then the lower shelf is the coldest spot, and that's good for meat, fish, and poultry. And it's also good to keep on the lower shelf in case any of that drips. It won't be dripping onto any of your other food. And then also with your fridge, you want to make sure that you don't overfill it because the air does need to circulate in order for the cooling to be efficient. And then also to note, at the bottom in some fridges, you have a low humidity drawer and a high humidity drawer, which I'll talk about in a little bit. But the low humidity drawer would be for fruits and vegetables that have a high tendency to rot. And the high humidity drawer is for most veggies, especially those that tend to wilt. And then this Eat Me First bowl is one of my personal favorite tips. I keep a bowl in my fridge that I put some food that would be going bad the fastest, or any like half cut avocados or lemons, just as a reminder, so you can see it and grab it really quickly, and then it doesn't get pushed back to the fridge where you forget about it and it goes bad. So that's one of my personal favorite tips that I like to do to reduce my food waste. And here's some things on how to make your vegetables last longer. So things like lettuce, you can wrap up in a paper towel and place it in a reusable bag, and that'll make it last longer. Avocado, you can wrap in cling wrap, or for a low waste alternative, you can store it in an airtight container. Carrots, you can wrap in paper towel and place in an airtight container. Salad greens, you can place in an airtight container. It helps if you put paper towel down as well. Celery, same thing, with paper towel in an airtight container. And things like pumpkins, you can wrap in cling wrap or beeswax wrap, and that'll help last longer as well. And not pictured here, but another thing is herbs. So for herbs, you can put them in the fridge in a like mason jar full of water, or wrap them in paper towel. Or another thing is, if you want to freeze them, you can blend them with oil or water and then place them into ice cube trays and place in the freezer for whenever you need something for herbs, and you get that fresh herby taste. So back to the humidity drawers. Um, we have low humidity drawers for things like fruits and vegetables that have a high tendency to rot. So these would be things like apples, avocados, grapes, mushrooms, peaches, pears, peppers, and squash. And then in the high humidity drawer, these would be veggies that are prone to wilting. So things like broccoli, Brussels sprouts, carrots, cauliflower, green onions, and leafy greens. And then it's also important to note not to overfill these drawers, because you still want the air to circulate. So fill them about 2/3 full. Um, and greens wilt slower when there is moisture, and fruits rot slower in humidity. So that's why we keep them at these levels. Um, and you also want to keep them, the low humidity from the high humidity, separate, because the food in the low humidity um, drawers, emit ethylene gas, and that causes the other produce to rot quickly. So you do want to separate them to keep them lasting longer. And things like citrus and melon can go in either drawer. And next we'll talk about best before and expiry dates. So best before does not equal expiry dates, and that's something that a lot of people use interchangeably, but they're not the same thing. And expiry dates on food can be responsible for up to 20% of household food waste. And so a really easy way to reduce food waste from expiry dates is to not rely on what the numbers say on the packaging, but you can use your senses. So smell it, look at the food, taste it, and just kind of trust yourself to see if it's still good or not. When in doubt, throw it out. But yeah, looking at it, smelling it will be a lot of times more efficient than just reading the expiry date on the packaging.
Ashton, can I chime in for a second? I know
Yes.
what this is actually a really good example of how we interchange best before dates and expiry dates, because we did it ourselves, I just realized. Because we were saying expiry dates on food can be responsible. Actually, it's best before dates on food
Uh,
are responsible for up to 20% of household food waste. And Ashton will explain how most foods have best before dates on them and not expiry dates at all. But I just want to point that out.
yes. Okay. Thank you. Um, so yeah, I have a quiz. So what does a best before date mean? Does it mean how safe the food is to eat, how fresh it is, or when the food has gone bad and should be thrown out?
Okay, wow. Everyone here knows what best before dates are. That's awesome.
Yay.
All of you said how fresh the food is.
Okay, good job. Yeah, so a best before date tells you how long unopened food is at its freshest. After a best before date, it might not be as fresh, tasty, or nutritious, but you can still buy, sell, or eat it. They don't tell you if whether the food is safe to eat or not. So a little bit more about best before dates. As we all know, it's not an indicator of food safety. Best before dates are actually chosen by the manufacturers and retailers as a date by when the food will retain taste, quality, and freshness. And a lot of grocery stores don't do this, but food can actually be sold after the best before date. And best before dates are only required on foods that are expected to go bad within 90 days. But you'll notice that a lot of things in the store will have a best before date, even though the majority of foods don't need them. Um, and they don't need them legally. And there are also no government regulations surrounding best before dates. So yeah, it's up to the manufacturers to just put a date on there. Next, we have a little quiz to see how long these common foods last. So eggs, milk, meats, breads, and cheeses.
So yeah, we're wondering how long do you think these foods last past their best before dates?
Yes.
Oh, sorry, I didn't launch it. There we go. This one will take a little longer because there's 5 different questions to answer. So
We got one.
yeah. These are kind of tricky to answer too, because it can be quite subjective. I find sometimes my cream can last for a really long time past the best before date, and other times another carton of cream won't last as long, or even sometimes my milk will go bad before the best before date, which is very rare, but again, as Ashton said, I like the sniff test and the eye test. Do I see mold? Is it lumpy? Does it smell bad? Okay, I have almost everyone has answered. Wait a little bit more to see if we get some more answers. And I find too that dairy and dairy that hasn't been opened, it can last much longer after its best before date too. Okay, so I'm gonna end the poll, share the results. Okay, so Ashton, how about I'll give you the results of each question, and do you want to reveal the answer?
Yes, that sounds good.
Okay, so for eggs, over half of you thought that they last 2 to 3 weeks after their best before date. What is the answer? Da, 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 da.
3 to 4 weeks.
Okay. Milk, 50% of you thought 2 to 4 days after the best before date, and other half 5 to 7 days.
Ooh, 5 to 7.
Nice. Okay, so meat after it's been cooked, over half of you thought 3 to 4 days, and 38% of you were thinking 5 to 7 days after it was cooked.
3 to 4 days after cooked.
And I've totally eaten, we have leftovers that last for ages, and the meat has lasted around 5 to 7 days too. So again, it all depends. Bread. So again, 63% of you thought 5 to 7 days, and 38% of you for thinking 2 weeks.
Let's see, 5 to 7 days.
Yeah, I love to freeze my bread because we never eat ours quick enough.
Yeah, there are lots of things you can do with stale bread.
And that too, yes. And then opened hard cheese. 75% of you said 3 to 4 weeks, and 25% of you said 1 to 2 weeks.
3 to 4 weeks past the printed date.
Yeah, and a lot of times what will happen with our cheese is there'll be some mold on it, but you can just, if it's hard cheese, you can just cut the mold off, and then you're good to go. Hey.
Okay, yay, good job. So moving on to an expiry date quiz. Which one of these foods has an expiry date on it? Infant or baby formula, wild rice, meat, or milk?
All right.
Yeah.
Hmm. So all of you thought that the infant baby formula has expiry date on it.
And everyone is right. So as mentioned, an expiry date is not the same as a best before date. They're only used on certain foods where it's very important that the nutrients be exactly correct, like infant or baby formula and meal replacements. Um, a little bit more. So expiry or expiration dates are required only on certain foods that have strict compositional and nutritional specifications, which might not be met after the expiration date. So there's only four things that require expiration dates: formulated liquid diets, meal replacements, nutritional supplements, and infant formula. And food should not be bought, sold, or eaten if the expiration date has passed. Yeah, so there's just some information about the difference between best before dates and expiry dates. And next, I'll talk about some creative uses of food. So you can get creative with food scraps in cooking. You can use food scraps in cooking, and for DIY projects, you can get creative with leftovers, and you can practice different ways to prolong your produce. Um, so for leftovers, a little tip is to leave leftovers at the front of the fridge. That way you'll see them and remember to eat them. You can also have a leftovers night, which is something that I did growing up. So on Thursdays or Fridays, we would kind of put all of our leftovers together and just use them up in that way. Um, so I really like that idea. And you can also think of your leftovers as ingredients. And then you can mix and match different leftover ingredients to create new meals. And then you can eat your leftovers and you won't get sick of them. And there are a lot of different uses for leftover fruit and vegetable peels. They're good for cleaning tough messes, especially lemons. You can add them in soup to make them more flavorful. You can make vegetable stock with food scraps, potato crisps, or just veggie crisps. Use them to exfoliate, keep brown sugar soft, and moisturize with avocado peels. So we have some recipe ideas, and towards the end of the presentation, I'll list some resources where you can find more of these recipe ideas. But we have some listed or shown here, so you can make a carrot top pesto, banana peel bacon. You just scrape the banana part out, and then marinate and cook the banana peels like bacon, and that's one of my favorite things. You can also make veggie peel chips. So just peel everything and scrape the potatoes or carrots out, and then you can cook the crisps, the peels, and then they become uh, crisps, and then make a broth by putting, you can put food scraps in there or onions and celery and all the odds and ends and peels and scraps. Makes a really nice homemade broth. And with peels, you don't actually need to peel all of your fruit, all of your vegetables. You can leave peels on potatoes and things like carrots. Just give them a good scrub and eat the whole thing that way as well. Uh, Also, broccoli and cauliflower, you can use the stalks and the leaves in meals. You can saute the greens as well. So yeah, we have a lot of resources at the end, but those are just some fun ideas for you. And then there are different ways that you can prolong your produce. You can blanch, dry, or dehydrate things, vacuum pack things. You can keep your herbs longer, canning, freezing, pickling. So lots of fun things in this way. And it doesn't always have to be food related as well. You can save your citrus peels, especially lemons, and soak them in vinegar for a few weeks. And then you can have your own homemade cleaner. You can also make homemade potpourri. So you can save and dehydrate things like citrus and just like berries. And then you can put that in a bowl with things like cinnamon sticks and pine cones, um, and some herbs or like greens, pine leaves. And then you have your own homemade potpourri. You can also do a stovetop potpourri and put everything on the stove with water, let that boil, and that'll make your house smell really nice. And then also with the holidays coming up, that's a nice gift. That's low waste, and homemade. So could be an idea for you. And then you can also make natural food dyes, with some vegetables, like avocados and avocado pits, leafy greens, beets, and citruses. So just some fun DIY things that are food waste related, but not to eat. We have another little quiz here. So we have some examples of food and what you can turn them into. Um, yeah, so what could you make with older bread? And you can pick as many things as you want.
And
So
again, I think there's 4 questions in this poll, so it'll take a little bit of time for everyone to answer it. And some of Ashton was mentioning, I'll just chat while about some of my favorite uses of, well, more uncommon uses of produce while everyone's answering the poll. Growing up, we have always actually eaten the broccoli stalk with the crown. We just cut off the outer part of the stalk and then cut it up into like quarter-sized pieces, and you just cook it with the broccoli crown, and it tastes just like the broccoli crown. It's delicious. And something else my parents will do is if they have a bunch of lemons, they'll just process the whole thing in a food processor and then freeze it, and then we'll put that in pancakes or waffles or other baked goods. And it's just a nice easy way to use up all of the lemon instead of just juicing it, and I find it really adds a lot more flavor as well. Okay, so we've got 6 out of 9 folks. And carrots are a great vegetable. You can do a lot of things with them. Very versatile. And of course, in the answers in this quiz or this poll only lists some of the many possibilities you can do with these food items. Okay, so I'm going to end the poll here. Share the results. All right, so with what could you make with older bread? Everyone said breadcrumbs. Yeah, totally. Oh, make chips. Oh, interesting. Okay. I also love to make bread pudding. Um, it's you just and use stale bread and you put it with a bunch of eggs and raisins, and it's delicious. Berries are starting to go. Yeah, smoothies, pancakes, yum. Fruit leathers, soup. Oh yeah, that's awesome. I like that. And juice. Potatoes, of course, chips, soup, mashed potatoes, pancakes, some good potato pancakes. Carrots. Yeah, again, so versatile. Juice. Pancakes. That would be interesting. Smoothies, soup, chips, pie, carrot top pesto. I found out carrot pie when my mother-in-law had tons of carrots from her garden. So instead of making pumpkin pie for Thanksgiving, I made carrot pie. And actually, I think it tastes even better than pumpkin pie. Okay, thanks everyone.
Yeah, and as I mentioned, we have on our website we have a food waste reduction tips and tricks webpage. So we have a list of some food scrap recipes and different ways to um, use up like food scraps and get creative with cooking. On this page, we also have links to a lot of different produce and foods with that link to storage tips and ways to cook things like bread and just different ways to like store your fruits and veggies, as well as a list of these resources. So the webpage that I'm talking about is the top one. There's also the Love Food Hate Waste website, Save the Food, IKEA's Scraps book, which is really great. Second Harvest, The Avoidable Crisis of Food Waste Roadmap, if you want to read more about food waste and how to avoid it. We have some more information on best before and expiry dates. And then Leftovers Foundation and Fireweed Food Co-op, and then the Too Good To Go app as well. And the last tip we have is to share excess food. So if you have a lot of food, rather than throwing it out, you can share with friends and family and neighbors. You can do food pools where if you have a lot of certain food items, you can just kind of distribute it at your workplace and let people kind of share that way. There's also community fridges you can donate food to, or go to pick up some food that way as well. And if you're interested, you can tune in tomorrow for our Rescue and Reimagine grassroots food redistribution in Winnipeg, where we have speakers from Leftovers Foundation and Fireweed Food Co-op to talk about their organizations. And that brings us to the end of our presentation. If anyone has any questions, or Kristen, if you have anything more to add.
Yeah, well, we had one question from Mike earlier on. And he actually asked how much land space does composting take up as opposed to landfilling? Do you want to answer that one, Ashton, or do you want me to do that one?
You can answer it.
Um, well, so of course, composting takes up land space. Most large composting operations, like if it was for the city of Winnipeg, would require a building like to compost inside. But the great thing about composting is that the end product, the compost, always leaves the site. So unlike a landfill where the garbage stays there forever and ever, and eventually you run out of space and have to create new landfills, you can continuously use that same composting space forever. You never have to expand because it's a closed loop cycle. You're just decomposing organic waste into compost. You're selling that, giving it away, and always continuously using that space. So yeah, I hope that answered your question, Mike. Other than that, I don't see any other questions. Joan did say this was an excellent session. It should be a required course for all. So I totally agree. I think a lot of us, it's so easy to, forget about our food and just throw it in the garbage or compost it. And, we forget that it does make an impact. And it's easy to be disconnected from our food and where it comes from and the impact that we have. And North Americans are quite wasteful, very wasteful, because we have the luxury to be. So thank you, Ashton, for the great presentation. Thank you all for joining us. As Ashton mentioned, please, if you're interested in finding out about food rescue efforts in Winnipeg, tune in tomorrow. You can still sign up. And as I mentioned before, we will email you the recording of the webinar by email, and then we'll also include the links that Ashton showed in the last two slides with all the resources for different recipes and other food waste reduction ideas. Oh, I forgot to turn my camera on.
I can stop sharing as well.
Okay. So yeah, so with that, I'll say have a good night, everyone, and I hope you're inspired to try new things with reducing your food waste. It doesn't have to be big things, it can be just little steps that you take to reduce more and more of your food waste. I know I still have to work at it too. So, all right, well, thanks everyone, and take care and have a lovely night.
Yes, thank you, everybody.